Queens! Happy whatever day it is you're listening to this. Today it is Monday. So happy Monday if you're listening on a Monday, and happy whatever day if you're listening on another day. I'm super excited for this episode. It took me a long time to write this, and it was inspired by two listeners, as most of my episodes are now. And the title of this episode, as you are probably aware, is How to Make Steps Toward Food Freedom Instead of Just Go All In and You'll Be Fine. Now, I want to be honest and start right off the bat with going all in isn't easy, and so I've titled it this way because this is what a listener question was, and I'm going to go into that in more detail in a moment. But my favorite way to coach clients, and the way that I use 99% of the time, is going all in. And I actually have an episode titled What I Think of the All In Method, and honestly that is what I use most of the time, primarily because I've done it myself, and it gets the best transformation in a short space of time. But not everyone is able to go all in, hence this episode now. So there's a lot of fear anyway, regardless of whether you are able to go all in or whether you're not. A lot of fear comes up, as you can well imagine. There is many layers to peel back and many beliefs to unlearn in order to live in food freedom and body love. It is certainly a process, and honestly, it's the hardest and best thing I have ever done in my entire life, just to go all in. But today I'm speaking about not going all in. So I had two queens recently reach out to me about recovering from an eating disorder with autism and ADHD. Now, autism spectrum disorder and ADHD are related in several ways, and they do have very similar symptoms. And actually, I've invited one of these lovely ladies from Recovery UK on Instagram onto my podcast, and it's going to be recorded soon, to give a live coaching session so that I can help this queen and others, just by listening to the coaching, navigate recovery in ADHD and autism. I work better in the moment. I work better when I have an actual client in front of me, which is why I do actually do, you'll notice if you're an avid listener, I do random, but quite often now, live coaching calls and have them as a podcast episode, because we can learn so much from listening or watching someone else being coached, because everything is so relatable. And so I prefer to work that way. So I have invited her on the show, and that will be recorded and then released soon. I was going to say soon and shortly in the same word, but that's impossible unless I make a word up, which I usually do. So let me go for it. Soon. Snortly. Anyway, part of her message to me was this: in your professional experience, what would you recommend for a client with autism who struggles with routine change, black and white thinking, overwhelm, intense emotions, and severe sensory issues, who also needs to recover from anorexia? Is there a modified approach? And so I would like to go into these struggles that she's just shared, and also give an alternative suggestion to recovery that isn't all in. And I would like to share right off the bat that I am not autistic, not that I'm aware of, so I really don't think I am, nor do I have ADHD. And so as I'm sharing my opinion in this episode, it is exactly that. It's my personal opinion from the information that I've been given, the questions that I've been asked, a bit of research, and just from my intuition. So I just want to put that right out there. The first one, routine change. Now, most humans in general like a routine, but those with autism need routine and structure to be able to cope. And so I've quoted her as well, and I'm going to read this out because it's important to what I'm going to speak to. People with autism need routine and structure or they cannot cope. I think in general we are also more black and white rigid thinking. And again, I know this is also common with people with eating disorders. All in the sense of abandoning all rules, behaviours, rituals, etc., and also eating to full mental hunger no matter what the food all the time would have just been impossible for me. Not only from the fear of weight gain, just from the absolute meltdowns that would have happened from routine changes. So my suggestion to help navigate this would be to actually have a routine, not bear with me because not a meal plan that they can rely on so much, but a routine with structure. So the all-in method, just to clarify, is, I always recommend my clients offer themselves 3 nourishing balanced meals a day plus anything else they want to eat as well. So it's not like I don't offer any structure or I don't work with structure at all with my clients with the all-in method. But all-in is just whenever you're hungry, eat whatever you want to eat it. But this this queen is saying that would have absolutely not been would have been a no-go, because she's really far ahead on her recovery journey, and she said my podcast has helped immensely, so I'm really happy to hear that. So going back to what I was saying, I would suggest to have a routine but not a rigid one. So for example, aiming to eat 3 full meals, 3 snacks and 2 desserts every day. And instead of having a rigid time, I would suggest having a window of time to eat within. So an example of a day could look like this: between 7:30 and 8:30, breakfast; between 10 and 11, a snack; between 12:30 and 1:30, a dessert, a lunch and dessert; between 3:30 and 4:30, another snack; between 6 and 7, dinner and dessert; and between 8:30 and 9, a snack before bed. Now, depending on what type of eating disorder the person is in recovery from, will depend on whether the person will be checking in with themselves and their body in each moment and eating intuitively or not. Because if someone is in active recovery from anorexia, then I would not suggest they check in with their body and themselves and eat intuitively, for obvious reasons, because they are unable to rely on intuitive eating due to the genetic migration response causing their biology to drive them to eat less and move more. So it would be pointless for them to check in with themselves. Again, I've been there. I'm a recovered anorexia, and I didn't want to eat. My biology didn't want me to eat. So definitely just have, without fail, it's non-negotiable, 3 meals, 3 snacks, and 2 desserts a day. If someone is not in recovery from anorexia, then I would absolutely and obviously I'm speaking to the autism and the routine that needs to be in place here. I would recommend them always having the above structure and checking in with themselves during eating to see how much they would like to eat. So the structure, obviously, with the breakfast, the snack, the lunch and dessert, the snack, the dinner and the dessert, and the snack, having that in place, but not on set times within a time scale, so it's not relied upon too much. I would always encourage those not in anorexia recovery to eat to full physical and emotional satisfaction every time that they eat, from a place of allowance and abundance. If that takes someone eating a shitload of food, then that is perfectly normal and okay, and is exactly what you need to be doing. If someone is depriving themselves in any way, that is restriction, and that will keep them in the eating disorder. You cannot recover from an eating disorder if you're still restricting and acting like a person with an eating disorder. The next thing I want to say about having this routine for those with autism or ADHD is to have a plan B if your routine changes, right? Life happens. Things don't always go to plan. That can throw some of us off for sure, but those with autism find it extremely difficult to cope. That's why I'd recommend a plan B if plan A, the usual structure I've just shared, goes tits up. It's difficult to give a clear example of what a plan B could look like, as life works in mysterious ways, but I'm going to give it a go so you understand the context of what I'm saying. Let's say that you got to work and you realised that you'd forgot your lunch and or your snacks. You've basically got to work and you have no food with you whatsoever. There goes the regular eating out the window with plan A, right? Instead of allowing this to throw you into a meltdown and allowing the ED to use this as an excuse not to eat, or if you're experiencing binge eating disorder, an excuse to fuck it and then go and eat 20 brownies, literally used to be me, instead of finding nourishing meals and a brownie, then you will have a plan B in place. Plan B in this said scenario could look like snacking on cereal bars, fruits, cookies, etc. that you already have somewhere at work, in your drawer, your locker, whatever kind of workplace you're in, because you would have been organised and ready for plan B. So you'd have stuff at work just in case. And then around your usual eating time, you would eat said snacks from the cupboard. And then you would know exactly what you're going to do for lunch because you've created this plan B. You perhaps know your work cafe, you know what food is usually always there. Let's say you know you like a baked potato with cheese and beans, and you know that's on the options every day. And so you know that you're going to have that without fail anyway, without having to think about it. The decision's already been made. So taking the time to create with support or by yourself, whatever feels right for you, to create a plan B as a backup scenario can absolutely help with the routine changes. The second thing I wanted to speak to was overstimulation, overwhelm, and intense emotions. So I'm going to quote now as well. When I restrict and this is from another queen, not the queen, they're all queens, not the queen from Real Recovery UK. This is from another person in my inbox who has autism. When I restrict, my brain goes numb and is less overstimulated, so I can cope with life a little better with very loud social settings and appear more normal and not have to leave early because it drives me crazy. I think the serotonin hypothesis makes sense, and just so you know, some studies point to low serotonin levels in the brains of autistic people. So using restriction to numb is extremely common. I need some water, sorry. I'm back. Using restriction to numb is extremely common. I often see it in clients who have experienced trauma as a way to cope via suppression. Restrict your food, restrict your body from nourishment, and restrict your emotions and feelings. Whilst that can be helpful, in quotes, short term, if you're completely overwhelmed by emotion and you feel like you can't cope, that's why it can be helpful. It's extremely damaging long term, and the longer this coping mechanism is used, the harder it is to change, but still 1,000% possible. Trust me, I have coached clients who have been in anorexia for 40 years and they have fully recovered. My intuition here in response to speaking to this autistic overwhelm, overstimulation, intense emotions, and again, I haven't experienced it myself, but my intuition here is saying to just pause. When you feel intense overwhelm or intense overstimulation, take a pause, take a moment, tell someone you trust that you're feeling highly overwhelmed. Acknowledge to yourself that you are feeling this way. That's really important, to acknowledge it within yourself. Go somewhere quiet. That could look like outside, to the toilet, to the cloakroom, wherever it may be, in the corridor, and remind yourself that it's okay to feel this way and it will pass. Put your hand on your heart and feel your heart beating with your eyes closed if you can. When you've done that, check in with yourself and ask yourself, what do you need? Do you need a glass of water? Do you need a hug? Do you need to go home? It's crucial that you honour yourself and your needs when possible and share with others that you trust how you're feeling. And really letting go of trying to be, quote, normal, because what is normal anyway, right? Love yourself for who you are, with your autism, with your ADHD, with your disability, with or without your flaws, whatever you see as flaws or imperfections. I mean, there's no such thing as perfect anyway. Practice loving yourself through it all and honoring yourself and honoring your needs. Because when you love yourself and when you love all that you are and all that you act as and all that you become, others will too. Because it starts with you. The outside world is a reflection on your inside world. And if you don't accept and love you for who you are, you cannot expect others to love and accept you for who you are either. It always starts with you. And a big part of this, what I've just explained, like pausing and checking in with yourself and honoring your own needs in the moment, is feeling your feelings. And that sounds so much easier said than done. I get it. But with practice, you can do this in a social setting without having to take time out as well. And it's important that you first practice in a safe space until you become comfortable doing so. So on the daily, I would recommend practicing meditation and quiet time so that you build up the skill to connect inward and quiet your mind whilst watching your thoughts. So you're not becoming your thoughts, you're not believing your thoughts, you're just being curious about them. You're not being overconsumed by them, you're not becoming your thoughts, you're just watching them. And honestly, the worst thing that can ever happen to you is that you will feel a feeling. You may think you're going to explode when you feel a feeling you don't want to feel, especially if you're resisting it. But I promise you, you will not explode. When you're in a state of overwhelm, you are in fight, flight, or freeze, a trauma response. Doesn't have to be a trauma response, it most likely is, but it's the central nervous system response that would have kept you alive, and it's a very healthy response, but not in the world we live in today. A feeling should not trigger a trauma response because your brain doesn't know the difference between a real or a perceived threat. So if you're thinking of something or if you see it as a threat to feel something, then your nervous system will go into fight, flight, or freeze. So to calm your nervous system down and bring it back down into parasympathetic nervous system state. And I remember it sympathetic or parasympathetic, like a parachute, it brings you back down into rest and digest. You need to physically relax first because you cannot mindset your way out of a trauma response. Taking deep breaths help, as well as saying out loud, relax, everything is fine, breathe. That can help as well. Avoid saying things like don't panic, don't stress. And the reason I say to avoid saying those things is because the unconscious mind can't process negatives. And so all it does here is panic, worry, stress. Even if you're saying the word don't stress, don't worry, don't panic, your unconscious mind only receives the word stress, panic, worry. So when you notice an intense feeling start to come up within you and your most natural response is to instantly push it away, choose instead to pause, because you have the conscious willpower to do this and it takes practice. Pause, take a conscious breath. Instead of pushing the feeling away or numbing it, say yes to the feeling instead. Invite the feeling in. Create space for it to be there. Let's say you feel shame washing over you. I know this sounds really fucked up and counterintuitive, but if you say, I feel shame, and I say yes to the shame, and I'm inviting the shame to be there, that's going to help massively. And then I want you to notice what it feels like in your physical body. If it had a colour, this shame or whatever feeling you're trying to not feel, what colour would it be? Does it have a shape? Is the feeling moving or is it stagnant? Is the feeling trying to tell you something? Is it trying to show you something that perhaps you're not paying attention to and trying to avoid? Feel the pain, feel the emotion, deeply be with it, and you will start to notice it soften. Emotions are simply energy in motion. So when you have an emotion, it's energy wanting to move through you. And then when it's moving through you and you allow it to move, it becomes a feeling. So, I mean, this is my personal opinion about this. So people use emotions and feelings interchangeably. I personally think the energy that is an emotion, the energy comes. So let's say sadness is there. It's trying to move through, and that becomes an emotion because it's energy in motion. When you allow the emotion to take place of this energy of sadness, you then feel it and it becomes a feeling. And so we need to receive an emotion, feel it, and then let it express it and let it go. So it needs to become a feeling that we must feel before we can let it go. Then the energy has passed through us. The problem is we don't get taught how to do this when we are younger or when we're at school. In fact, we get taught the exact opposite. How many times have you had these things said to you, or you've perhaps said them to others? No judgment. I'm sure I know I have multiple times said to people, or you've had this said to you as a child. Don't cry. Big girls don't cry. Don't be angry. Oh, don't be upset. Suppress, 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 right? When you make this a daily practice, feeling your feelings, you will become less overwhelmed over time. You will become less consumed by your emotions, and you will be able to retreat back to your safe space within. And I want to quote something else that this queen shared with me in the DMs, and she said, something I used to have incredible panic attacks and shutdowns over, where I would go non-verbal and not be able to move for hours, was feeling full. It was partially anorexia based, but there was definitely a purely sensory trigger to it as well, which I don't think would be the same in non-autistic people. This made it extremely difficult to honour extreme hunger in early recovery. Now, I've experienced extreme overwhelm when feeling full before, to the point where I wanted to leave my body or even die because I just couldn't cope with the emotional pain from fullness. I've experienced this to that degree. I've spoken about this before actually on a previous episode about feeling full, so go and check that out if that's something that you want support through. But I think it's worth visiting just briefly now, because for me, it wasn't the physical feeling of feeling over full. It was more so what fullness meant to me. As fullness to me meant absolute disgust in me, in my body, failure, rejection, and devastation. And that was too much to bear. And honestly, I didn't cope very well back then, but now I've learned how to be with emotional pain from just sharing briefly with you how, and change my perception around what it meant. That's a big part of it. After you've been with the emotional response, you can then use mindset, which is so freaking powerful. And that's the change in your perception about what you make fullness mean over time. Distraction also helps a little. So when I would feel extremely full after a binge, I would watch a movie that I could lose myself in. So I was out of my own head. I would also wear loose clothing. And in all honesty, I practically lived in my dressing gown because that was the only thing that didn't dig into me. But with regards to what this queen is saying about her totally shutting down when she was full due to her autism, and therefore then it was extremely difficult for her to honour her hunger in early recovery, here's what I would suggest for anyone going through something similar. Have all of your foods that your extreme hunger wants to eat in the house in abundance, so that you can see that there is enough. There's always enough. When you are eating, stop just before you reach your trigger point of being, quote, too full, if you're able to connect to that, of course. And then as soon as you are able, I want you to eat again, because it's so important to honour this extreme hunger in as much as possible. And any way that you can do this, the better. It may take time for your body to trust that there's enough food and to get all its needs met, and in order to get back to its natural set point weight, compared to someone who can just go all in. It's going to take longer doing it this way. But if fullness only traumatizes you and actually stops you from moving forward into recovery and food freedom, then do anything, no matter how small, do anything that enables you to keep taking action steps, no matter how small, towards recovery and towards food freedom. Because that's the goal. The goal is unrestricted eating, always. There's also a lot of mindset work to do in recovery and on your journey to food freedom, but pro-recovery self-talk that you actually believe, otherwise it doesn't work, is a huge part of supporting yourself. So an example of what I would say to myself when I was panicking, when I was full, was this. These feelings are so painful right now. The last thing I want to do is be okay with my feelings and this awful sensation of fullness. But I can do hard things. It's okay. It's going to be okay. Even though it feels like it, I'm not going to die. This will pass. It's the eating disorder that is making this so emotionally painful for me right now. I am no longer available for it to control me anymore. It's okay. I'm safe. I'm loved. I will get there one step at a time. So something similar for you to just soothe yourself through the fullness and the emotional trigger response that you have to that. All right, number 3 is severe black or white thinking, right or wrong. And again, I'm going to quote one of the queens here to start off with. Diet and exercise are something I can very clearly do right or wrong in others people's perception. Diet culture assumed. I used to be a chunky kid and that was clearly wrong and I could fix it and I was praised for doing that. Whilst the much bigger thing was unknown, it was a very obvious way to be socially acceptable. Now, black or white thinking is always a characteristic for those with eating disorders. I have not coached one client who didn't have black or white thinking when they first came to me. And I assume that those with autism experience this way of thinking on a deeper level. When there is no black or white thinking, when there is no right or wrong, you're left with this space in between, which is where natural balance happens. If you think of a pendulum, which I actually have, for those watching the video, if you think of a pendulum, right, and you're swinging it, it will never stop swinging. If I leave it, if I keep doing this and like keep moving it and making it swing again, it will never stop. But if you just leave it alone, it naturally stops swinging. And so black or white thinking can show up in anorexia like, oh, well, I've missed breakfast, so I may as well restrict for the rest of the day and start again tomorrow. But tomorrow never comes, does it? How long has your tomorrow been? 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, longer? Black or white thinking can show up in binge eating or bulimia, such as, oh, well, I've eaten one cookie, so I may as well go and eat the whole pack of cookies, plus a ton of chocolate, plus 5 tubs of Ben & Jerry's, plus 50 pizzas and a jar of peanut butter, right? Been there too. But with support, if you learn that it's safe and actually extremely beneficial in your life in so many ways to be in the grey area in the middle, which I like to call the colourful area, you will be able to let go of your black or white thinking. Trust me, I was the most extreme black or white thinker I've known, and I've managed to let go of that to a degree in which has enabled me to heal my relationship with food and my body. This takes gaining clarity on what you are seeing as right or wrong, lovingly challenging and then changing the beliefs and patterns that are stopping you from letting go of black or white thinking, and then getting evidence that life is better when you actually act and behave in the grey, in the balance in the middle. It's worth pointing out that it's no good just saying to somebody, nobody really cares about what you look. Society is a big liar, so just get over it. No one cares, so just don't care about what your body looks like or what your food looks like. Whilst that is true, there are so many layers to peel back and blocks to work through until the person can genuinely believe that, that's why coaching is so transformative, hence why I'm a coach, because that statement, again, no matter how true, isn't going to make a difference to someone who's in the thick of their beliefs and their trauma response and their emotions about caring about what people think of them. Like, this is why, again, coaching is so transformative and why I'm a coach. Number 4, obsessive tendencies. And I'm going to quote this queen again, focusing on numbers, calories, routine equals calming. I also use it to my advantage to be eating enough every day in good phases. Intense interest, and this is me speaking now, not the quote. Intense interest and repetitive behavior can be a source of enjoyment for autistic people and a way of coping with life, with everyday life. But they may be obsessions and limit people's involvement in other activities and cause distress or anxiety. Autistic people also concentrate very well on something that they love. Their hobbies give them a great deal of meaning in life. And for some people, I'm assuming if you're listening or watching this is speaking to you. But for some people, their favourite pastime may seem like an obsession. And before I go any further, for those that are watching the YouTube video, yes, this is a different day. I started recording yesterday and it took longer than I thought, and I had another meeting I had to be in. So this is another day and I'm wearing something different. And so the editing is just going to be very random. The podcast, you won't really be able to tell much, I hope, with my voice tone and the sound of it. But just wanted to say that because otherwise it'll be weird if I didn't acknowledge the fact that I've completely changed the way I look today compared to like a second ago. So the answer to this, in my opinion, is to use your obsessive tendencies to support your recovery instead of going against it. Now, just imagine for a second if you could be as obsessive with recovery as you currently are or have been with restricting. You absolutely can. I used my obsessive all-in mindset to recover. My mantra was literally, whatever it fucking takes. I was so all in, to the point where, I'm going to share now, I was overachieving at recovery. And so, for example, when I was challenging my fear of Nutella, because I would binge on Nutella all the time, like literally I would whack the jar in the microwave and drink the shit. And when I say shit, I don't mean Nutella shit. I'm using that just because that's the word I chose to use. I would literally drink it. And so when I was challenging this in my recovery, I would purposefully eat more Nutella than I actually wanted to if I was checking in with my body, not necessarily because I was in a reaction to emotional restriction or deprivation. It was like I was trying to prove to myself that I could do it. And so I was, quote, overachieving at the challenge. And so just notice if that is something that you do, and that's definitely better than obviously using your obsessive tendencies to restrict. Whatever you can do to use your personality, to use your values, to use your traits to support your recovery, the better. It might just take a bit of a mindset shift and a pivot so you can go full force with this. And this is what I did, and it absolutely helped me. I used to say to myself, like when I was really struggling and questioning recovery and being like, oh my God, this is so hard, but what about weight gain? And I would say to myself, okay, Victoria, are you really going to take the easy way out by going back to restriction? Are you ready? Are you really going to do the easy thing? You don't do stuff that's easy. You can do hard things. Like, we're just going to keep fucking going with this. And so I would kind of hype myself up and lovingly call myself up with the question, are you really going to take the easy way out? And so that might be helpful for some of you listening to this as well. But over time, as I continued to challenge the Nutella and my other binge foods, this naturally did balance out, because as I healed the root of needing to prove something to myself and others, because overachieving is just needing to prove something to others and to yourself, which isn't healthy or balanced either, because it's all ego-based. when I healed the root of wanting to prove stuff all the time, needing to get something super right or be really good at it, it did just naturally balance out. And then I could generally just listen to my body. And honestly, I don't really care for Nutella now. Like, no shit. I never thought I would say that. I don't have it in the house because I just don't really. I mean, if someone bought me some, I'd probably be like, well, okay, I'll find something to have it on because it still tastes nice, but it just does not appeal to me at all. I have no desire for it. And even when I go traveling and we stay in hotels and stuff, and the breakfast at the kind of hotels we stay in are really good, and they tend to do like a massive breakfast buffet with all the stuff and croissants and Nutella. And I used to have a croissant, and then the really tiny little packets of Nutella that you get in these hotels. I used to have a croissant and then have like at least seven little packets of Nutella, and just like keep putting it on the croissant. And now that doesn't appeal to me either. So the only way I've got here is by radical allowance, which is completely counterintuitive, right? But the paradox is real. And so what I would really advise you doing here is getting clear on your values and lining them up with your recovery and food freedom journey. This exercise around values is something that I do with my clients at the start of coaching to help propel them forward. For example, if one of your values is control, now mine actually wasn't, I mean, it's definitely not now, but it wasn't when I started this process. And this is something that I've kind of stumbled upon myself and then just put it into my coaching because it's so powerful. But many of my clients, one of the values when we first start working together is control. So I would say, how could you pivot that control so it's supporting your recovery instead of hindering it? So just an example of like a mantra version of switching this. Instead of I must control my food in order to feel safe, you could flip that to I take back control from the eating disorder, as having an eating disorder is not safe, it's dangerous. So can you see how you're still using your value of control, but honestly, that will more than likely change as you continue along this process, especially because in my opinion, the opposite to control is surrender. And when, especially if you work with me, it's not an if, it's an absolutely when you understand and how to surrender, and when you feel that and you experience surrender and not just hear the word, life will never be the same again, because you realize that, wait, you actually didn't really have control in the first place. And control is anxiety provoking and tense and not fun. And when you surrender and let go and learn to be okay in the unknown, which is the key to life, if you ask me, everything shifts. So it's aligning your values with what you're doing here with recovery. And so there's also, though, some strategies to use to start supporting yourself to let go of obsessive tendencies. So if you're working with me, I'm also use who you are, not against you, but against you to help you recover. So that's really powerful. But I've taken this from a website actually that I've linked in this blog, because these words aren't mine, but I think it was really beneficial. For those with ADHD and autism, strategies to use to start supporting the letting go of obsessive tendencies. And they said, understand the function of the behavior. So think about the function of the repetitive behavior or obsession. What does the person get out of it? Does it reduce anxiety? Does it block out noise? I mean, there's a reason why we do everything, right? Is the obsession more harmful than good? With an eating disorder, yes, that obsession is doing way more harm than good. That's from me. The second thing they said was, I've took some things out because I don't agree, like, it's not that I don't agree, but I don't think it's worth putting all of these in here, but I've picked out the most resonating ones. The second thing is modify the environment. So does the person always seem to find a particular place, like a classroom or a workplace, hard to cope with? Is it too bright? You might find that modifying the environment, for example, turning off the strip lighting, can help to reduce sensory discomfort. If the behavior is a way of getting sensory input, look for alternative ways of achieving the same sensation. And so let me try and put this into restriction. can you make your environment as difficult, as challenging as possible to actually restrict, so you're supporting where you want to go? What does restriction, or how does restriction make you feel? What does it bring to you? And how can you get that from something else? These kind of questions are what you could be asking yourself. Increase structure. So I talked about this in number 1, the routine change, about having the structure and the routines in place without it being rigid and something to take as gospel, but then having a plan B with that. Manage anxiety. Obviously, this is a big one for everybody, but self-regulation skills are any activities that help a person to manage their own emotions and behavior. If you can help the person to identify when they're feeling stressed or feeling anxious and help them learn alternative strategies to use, you may in time see less repetitive and obsessively habitual behavior. Strategies to consider might be relaxation techniques such as taking 10 deep breaths. Obviously, the breath is very powerful, it's free, and it's always accessible. But for me, honestly, sometimes, especially when I was on this journey, when I'd focus on my breath, it kind of made my tension worse. So just for me, even now, it just helps to relax. So I don't focus on my breath. I focus on my physical body relaxing and just letting go. You can squeeze a stress ball. There's all sorts of funky feeling stress balls out there now. I went to a birthday party on Sunday and it was Wouter's nephew, and he had this, it felt so weird, this ball. It was quite big and it felt really nice and weird to squeeze it. So there's all sorts of things out there, as well as finding ways to communicate their need to support, either verbally, or if that's too difficult, by showing a red card or by writing a note. So those that are close to you, if you speak to them or write to them, or have like a communication tool that you can use when you're struggling and you may be overwhelmed, something to show them or something to do so you can reach out and get the support that you need in that moment. And many autistic people have difficulty with abstract concepts such as emotions, but there are ways to turn emotions into more concrete concepts, e.g. stress scales. You can use a traffic light system, a visual thermometer, or a scale of 1 to 5 to present emotions as colours or as numbers. So for example, a green traffic light or a number 1 can mean I am calm, and a red traffic light or a number 5 could mean I am angry. So develop other strategies to manage anxiety. And again, there's links that I put in my blog out, so I'll just be here reading out, which isn't fun for you to hear either. Such as a brain in hand digital self-management support system. Consider contacting a counsellor experienced in working with autistic people. And then the next one is to set boundaries. If you need to set clear, consistent boundaries, for example, and this is obviously for yourself, to ration an object, the time you should spend doing something, and you might need support in this, limit the time of where you're going if that causes more restrictive behaviours. Get a realistic target and put together a plan to reach that target over a period of time. And it's really important to set small, realistic goals to help build on success and increase confidence. That's the biggest reason why I'm recording this episode, right? Because how can you recover from an eating disorder if you have autism and you can't just go all in because of the reasons that we're talking about? So yes, excuse me, yes, it might take you longer, but it's so worth it because you're actually going to get there, other than just re-traumatizing yourself and being overwhelmed and not being able to do anything. So check these out on my blog. And then the last one before I go into another one of mine is to provide alternatives. Anything else that is not harmful, because the eating disorder behaviors are very harmful, right? Anything that provides the same or similar feeling or anxiety relief should be explored. This may be switching calorie counting for, this was one of mine actually. This might be switching calorie counting instead for having a chart that you tick things off with every meal time. So for example, the chart may have a little box for proteins, carbs, fat, fiber, and pleasure, tastiness, yumminess for each meal. And the name of the game would be to tick each box for each meal. So is this meal, does it contain protein? Does it contain fats? Does it contain carbs? Does it contain fiber? Is it pleasurable? Because that's really important. And if that can help like go from the number thing and having to obsess about that to at least something that's going to be beneficial. You could also do something similar for snacks. So you could have a tick box little chart for snacks that include tastiness, tick, you make sure it actually tastes nice, and blood sugar balancing. So if you were to have a snack that would be blood sugar balancing, most snacks tend to be on average like carbohydrates. To balance that, you would have a fat or a protein with it. You don't have to have both. You need a stabilizer, which is either a fat or a protein. And so this could look like having some peanut butter, which does contain fat and protein, with a few cookies, for example. So the tick box for the snack could be pleasure and blood sugar balancing. For example, if you're having some chocolate, which does contain fats and carbohydrates, so to be honest, that's not going to spike your blood sugar as much anyway. If you're having candy, like sweets, like pick and mix sweets, that's mainly just carbohydrate, sugar, and so you could choose to have a fat or a protein with that, or eat them right directly after your balanced meal, right? There's ways around this, but having a little chart instead of the numbers is going to be supporting you on this journey instead of hindering your recovery. Number 5, this is back to me again, is making choices. So again, I'm going to quote something from my DMs. The other thing I found very difficult and still do is actually choosing what to eat. Even with extreme hunger and mental hunger, I genuinely don't know what I wanted, and my brain literally would not allow me to eat the wrong option. So I would spend ages choosing food and would end up physically not enough time in the day to eat to my full hunger. Again, this isn't even coming from a place of fear of weight gain. Now, for this, I would definitely suggest using a choice making application, which I've linked in my blog, or a coin flipping app. So let's say you have more than 2 choices of what to eat. You can use the wheel to decide. So you can literally I think you can put up to like 22 different options. So even if you have like a lot of options, I mean, you probably won't want to type in all 22, but let's say you've got 5 to 10 things and your brain is like froze on what to do, type them in on this little app that I've linked on my blog to this, and it does it all for you. It's pretty fun as well. So it makes the decision for you. And the same goes with the coin flipping app, or an actual real coin if you have real money anymore. Heads can be, let's say you're choosing between pizza and, I don't know, a toastie. Or it could be anything. Let's say you say heads is pizza and tails is toasty. You flip the coin. If it lands on tails, you're eating the toasty. The decision is made for you, right? So those are some tools that can be really beneficial to help you with decision making. And then alternatively, if you're with someone that you trust, you can simply ask them to make the decision for you and then just go with that. So during my anorexia recovery, my mum was the decision maker, and honestly, even though I hated it for obvious reasons, it was a lot easier for me because I didn't have a choice, right? I didn't have a choice. So if you can surrender to someone else's decision making, that can be really beneficial, even if it's just an app. And so as I wrap up this episode, I just want to give some random other tips for recovery without going all in. And again, I absolutely advise going all in, but if you cannot, then these are the things that I would recommend. So you can add your trigger foods and your binge foods or your fear foods into your daily diet little and often. So for example, let's use my Nutella example again. I used to really binge on that and be so scared of it as well because of the binging and the weight gain and all of that. So you could, I started to do it this way, then I just found all in and I was like, do you know what, I'm just doing whatever it takes. But you can start to add, if Nutella is your thing, you can start to add it into your oats, a tablespoon into your oats every morning. You can start to have a snack with a slice of toast with Nutella on it. You can, if it's M&Ms, which is your thing, you can just randomly have a handful of M&Ms after breakfast. So you're bringing these fear foods in slowly, bit by bit without allowing yourself access to eat as much as you want when you want, which I recommend. But again, that might not be available for everyone to do. Another thing you could do is the things that you're currently binging on, if you're experiencing binging, some of you might not be when you're listening to this, but whatever food you're scared of or afraid of or binging on or binging and purging on, those kind of foods tend to happen in the evening. For me, it was always restricting the day, and then I was very good at restricting for a long time, and it used to just be weekends or once a month, and it went to every weekend, and then it went to like every Friday, Saturday and Sunday, and then it spilled over to the Monday, and then it was like basically I'd restrict all day and then binge every night, and then purge the next day for laxatives, over exercise, etc. And so I encourage you to have your foods that you only currently allow yourself to eat in the evening, have them in the morning or at lunchtime. So you can and this feels really weird, but it's a way to get over your food anxiety for sure. Like that could look like randomly having a scoop of Ben and Jerry's after lunch, instead of sitting at night and eating 2 tubs of it. And there's nothing wrong with that, but I'm just giving you other alternatives to start adding these foods in and recover without going all in. So random evening foods that you would eat in the evening, have them in the day or in the morning. You could also eat your fear foods with support from others on a call. There's people that offer support calls on Instagram especially as well, like they do lives. The lady that I'm thinking of her Instagram handle is Diets Don't Work Health at Every Size, but the health at every size is abbreviated HEAS. She does support calls, like just live on Instagram. Some coaches do, but you can also ask a friend, and you can also go and sit with others or ask them, when I eat dinner tonight, can you sit with me? Or every lunchtime at work, do you mind sitting with me? Because otherwise I find it difficult to eat. And if you're eating with me, that will help me as well. So you can definitely ask for support. And this is a really big one, have your trigger, forbidden foods, fear foods, on show all the time in your house and at your work if you can. Because the reason behind this is it's exposure therapy. The more that you see your fear foods, your trigger foods all the time, and you're just surrounded by them in abundance. So it's really important that you don't just have like, let's say M&Ms are your thing. You don't just have like a small bag of M&Ms like on the table. I'm talking like 3 to 4 family-sized bags of M&Ms poured into the biggest bowl you've ever seen. And so you can see them in abundance and then randomly just have 1 or 2 or a handful randomly throughout the day. But even just seeing them and opening your cupboards and having all of your fear foods in there all the time, over time that can really help, because then there's nothing to be afraid of if you're seeing them every day, all day, and nothing bad happens, right? Support is important around this as well, but that's something for you to consider. You can also buy portioned out sizes of things. So you can buy chocolate bars or bags of crisps that are already portioned out ready. So, this didn't work for me because I would then just buy 10 small bars and eat 10 small bars instead of like 2 family size bars. But again, this is for those that aren't ready or willing or can't go all in. So to bring the fear foods in, have like a normal size, what is normal, right? Like a normal small package size bag of crisps or chocolate bars, and you might feel safer having those instead of being overwhelmed with like a big bar. But I want you to still have them in abundance in your house, but just you can have like a portion size, so you can probably trust that it's portioned out for you, so you're not getting it quote wrong. And then there's 2 more things I have for you. You can introduce 1 new fear food a week, starting with your least anxious food and then gradually moving up to your highly anxious food. So in my program, I have like a chart that you can fill in where you write all of your fear foods down. So fear foods meaning binge foods, trigger foods, or just foods that you don't eat because you're so afraid of them. and then you label them like red, amber, and green. So like obviously red is like absolutely so much anxiety thinking about eating them, or when I do, I always binge on them. And then the amber and then the green, still the green will be a fear food, but it might be less than obviously the red or the amber. And you'd start with that list, and then you'd pick a green fear food to start to challenge this week. And then when you feel comfortable with that, you'd pick probably one from the with support, so I know where you're at and your mindset and how your anxiety is. You'd pick one from the orange or the amber and then implement that, and then you might go back to the green or the amber again, or you start with the red. So again, it's slower, but that doesn't matter because you will get there. You can start to implement them from that list, like just one a week. And when you realize that you don't die and nothing bad happens, you start to increase your confidence, and then you're able to add other things in as well. And then the last thing I want to share, some other tips, is to journal about how you survived when you ate something scary, and it's reinforcing that it's safe to eat these foods. Journaling is really beneficial. You don't have to do it, of course. And you may think, why do I have to journal when I can just think about it? But something magical kind of happens when you take pen and paper and start to write. Also, it confirms what you already know, but it strengthens that. So let's say you introduced a red fear food, which could be chocolate, and you ate some chocolate. Let's say you started off once a week and then you increased it to 3 times a week, then you had a little bit every day. After each time you've had chocolate, write down how you feel about that, and then over time you'll find out that it's safe to have the chocolate. And again, support is really necessary through this, so you don't panic or anything. But those are the tips that I would share to heal your relationship with food without going all in. So I hope that you found that helpful. Again, I haven't worked with anyone who is autistic yet. I have worked with clients and still have clients who have ADHD, and I do notice the difference. But I just wanted to share my honest personal and professional opinion, and I hope that has been supportive. And I ask this occasionally, but I really would like the time to ask you if you could go and 5-star review my podcast. I would be so grateful. More and more people find it. Obviously, if you don't want to give 5 stars, I'd ask you not to review, because that's not going to help anybody. It's not that I can't take a review that's honest. Of course I can, but I'd rather you email me or message me to tell me how you would like the podcast to be improved. But I would be so grateful if you could give back and just take the moment to just 5-star review my podcast. I greatly appreciate it. I greatly appreciate you for being here. And if you have any episode requests, then just Instagram me or email me, Facebook message me, and I will reply usually with a voice note. So thank you so much. I love you so much, and I will see you next time. Mwah.